Good morning. This is Dr. Kalia again, and today is March 29th, 2020, and this is video 13 of coronavirus pandemic Terminator series. And I believe we left yesterday at slide 62, so I'm going to give a little recap and then we'll go on to slide 63. So what I wanted to capture was, I thought about it. I was not 100% sure whether I made myself clear on why I was talking about the wildebeest, the flock of birds, and the school of fishes. The point I wanted to make was the wildebeest run somewhere from 8 to 20 miles an hour in a flock or in a herd. And when that many wildebeest are running next to each other within a span of sometimes they're not even a foot apart from each other, clearly they are not using their visual cues to the visual cortex, and nor are they using their auditory cues to the auditory processing centers in the brain. So some other mechanisms, and many neuroscientists have hypothesized on which mechanism they're using by which their brains synchronize. And one of the British scientists who has hypothesized a completely novel mechanism has not been scientifically accepted yet. Excuse me. So for that reason, I'm not going to give him the scientific credit. However, we do have to look for some other mechanism than the usual mechanism. Because if your visual cortex is processing that information and is coming to the prefrontal cortex or the conscious part of the brain, that calculation takes much longer than the wildebeest have when they're running in a herd. And the same phenomena in a flock of birds. We have the finest pilots who fly planes in the Blue Angels, and it is extremely rigorous training for them to keep the planes away from each other. And even then, after the rigorous training, the planes do fall out. Occasionally they collide with each other and fall out of the sky. However, I have seen thousands and thousands of flocks of birds flying, and they never collide into each other and fall. Again, even though their brains are much smaller, and the visual and auditory cues is not what they're relying on, so their brains synchronize. And same thing happens in the schools of fishes. When I go snorkeling, I see them. They never collide into each other. They smoothly go by each other. So that particular phenomena of how the brains of various members of a species synchronize with each other is what I'm focusing on. And that same phenomena happens to human beings also. We, at this point, cannot neuroscientifically explain the mechanism of how brains synchronize. However, if you have watched the market volatility uh, from middle of February to around March 24th and maybe March 25th, 2020, you can see how the brains of millions of people around the world synchronize in a form of greed when the market shoots up 8, 9, 10%, and how the same phenomena synchronizes in fear. The amygdalas of all human beings synchronize, and in fear, how the market has lost 8, 10%. But around before the $2 trillion stimulus package was passed, the market was down 30%. And this phenomena of market synchronization of human brains who are just watching this news on TV, how well they synchronize in terms of fear and greed is also a same phenomena, how the wildebeest, the flock of birds, and school of fishes synchronize. And the same phenomena is what happens when there is a group thinking going on, and that led us to unnecessary Iraq war. And the same phenomena that prevents people like me from giving advice that's contrary to the popularly held wisdom of exclusive advice of 6 feet distance and reliance on N95 masks and surgical masks. So that was the reason I wanted to bring that when the whole herd of animals, and in this case Homo sapiens, brain synchronize, it's very, very difficult to go contrary to that standard advice. So I'm going to go over the of why I think this standard advice is less than optimal at best and completely flawed at worst. But I'm going to be respectful, and all these people in World Health Organizations and other public health agencies, none of them have any malicious intent. None of them are giving this advice based on any malintention. It's just, in my mind, they have a scientific blind spot in their thinking. So I'm going to explain the scientific blind spot. Behind me, you can see the wall behind me over here. And in between the camera of this computer, there is air over here. And I already explained the scientific mechanism by which that air is contaminated. So just imagine if there are viral particles floating around in front of my face, and those viral, just like the air is touching my forehead, my eyes, my eyeballs, my pupils, and my face and my nose. So essentially contaminated air is touching me. And just think of this if the air was contaminated with the blistering agent rather than a viral particle. So I'm going to explain to you the mechanism of why I don't think this is a surgical mask. This surgical mask has been around probably for more than 100 years. And the surgical mask was never developed to prevent the surgeon from contaminated air. This mask was developed with one intention and one intention only. When the surgeon and all the OR staff, when they are operating, and we usually have people's bellies, their chests, their legs, their knees, their brains open in front of me. So just like recently I've been coughing, and unfortunately I apologize for my recurrent coughing. And just now, like, I coughed. So when I cough, all the contaminated air droplets that come out of my mouth should not land in the patient's belly in front of me when we are doing surgery. So this mask, what it does is through these two holes, pushes it back. But when I'm breathing through this mask, I'm breathing in all the contaminated air. So if this air has lethal viral particles, it offers me zero protection. And then we are going to take the mask off, and we're going to continue the same analogy of this viral particles. So now you can see my eyeballs, my pupil is also exposed to the same air, and this whole area also, and this whole area. How am I going to dip my face in bleach every couple of minutes to clean my face or sterilize my face? So that advice of surgical mask is completely useless. And then comes the N95s. That has been, of course, the N95s are in short supply anyways. And even if we had plenty of them, so I'm going to explain to you the same flaw in that. Now the N95, before it goes on my face, is already bathed in air that's contaminated with viral particles. So this side of the mask is contaminated, this side of the mask is contaminated. So now what I've done is I've taken contaminated air viral particles right here, and I have put it on my face. And now the side of the mask that's touching my nose that I'm breathing in, I'm already breathing in viral particles. And same way, my forehead, my skin, my eyeballs, my pupil, everything is contaminated. So what kind of protection does it offer? In my mind, very little. So that's the problem with this particular mask. And the next kind of mask that we have had around for a long time, this is a much, much thicker, high quality mask that actually is so thick that breathing through it, even somebody like me who has no lung disease, no heart disease, is perfectly healthy, it gets painful to breathe after about 3 to 5 minutes, but I'm going to show that to you how this will work. Again, this mask, even though very high quality, it's useful in healthcare settings if we go into the rooms where people with tuberculosis, TB, etc., are isolated, and we wear the mask outside the room. So I'm going to wear the mask. So as you can see, even though I'm wearing this mask, once I make it airtight, this mask is very, very difficult to breathe in because it's so thick. So you have to generate a lot of negative force using your chest muscles and the ribs in between your ribs, the muscles in between your ribs. And very soon it gets tiring, and after a while you can't get enough air through it. So that's the reason you have to have a mask that covers your entire face and a Tyvek suit that covers your skin, and you are no longer breathing in contaminated air. So this mask would have some utility. However, the utility is very quickly lost uh, because of the negative pressure force that your muscles have to generate. Back on slide 63, we already talked about the multiple flawed thought processes that are giving us this advice of personal protective equipment. And we are already working on how to mitigate this contamination with the coronavirus pandemic by keeping people away from contaminated air. And we have already talked about the blind spot in the thinking process. And nobody, like we already mentioned, is thinking in terms of indoor contaminated air and this air contamination is with lethal viral particles. And so I only covered a couple of slides, went to slide 63. However, this demonstration of the masks and the flaw in that mask process I wanted to bring out because I thought this was an important enough concept. So we are going to wind down video 13 at this point, and then we would pick up in video 14 in just a few minutes.